Jidoka is a way to get better at what you do. It's a way to explore your own work and get better. Basically, whenever we work, whenever we do any job, we create some value, but we also create some waste. Some of it for ourselves, some of it for others behind us. For instance, when I write a book, a greater part of the quality of a book comes from my editor's work. Tom Ehrenfeld, he's the one who gets the manuscript and shows me where it's not working, and I rework it. But the way we usually want to work is I will be inspired, I'll write the entire thing, I'll send it to him, and then he says, well, listen, the point you're trying to make is not that obvious. The logic of your argument is not so clear, some sentences are all over the place, and I would rework it, the whole thing. This is incredibly wasteful. Now, the trick about Jidoka is saying that instead of doing it all in one go, we start to stop to learn to self-detect our mistakes, the things we don't do so well. So, for instance, rather than send the entire manuscript, the trick is that whenever I have a doubt, I'll send it to Tom and say, what do you think? And we have this very, very quick exchanges that help me recognize what I do wrong. Sometimes I'm thinking too far ahead in the points I want to make, and I'm not so clear. I tend to think in lists, so sometimes my argument is not so convincing because it's a list of points, and I do tend to ramble when I write, so sometimes my sentences are overlong, and I need to correct that. The point is that the strategy of learning self-correction, self-detection of your problem is where you get into a deeper understanding of how you work. So how do we want to do this? First thing is, once we have this strategy in mind, we will find a score. We'll find a score. The score is pretty simple. Is how much of my work goes into the next person, how much the next person creates problems for the next person, how many defects I made that I don't catch myself that the next person catches. If we go back to writing, some pieces of writing I know very well, like for instance the columns, and I send them to my editors, such as Tom, and they have very few comments because by and large I know what I'm doing and it's all pretty much fine the first time. Other pieces of writing I do are far from as clear, and I get a lot of responses, a lot of things, so I can see that I'm not so good. Now, the Jidoka principle is you count the times that their defect passed through your hands and you didn't notice it. How do you actually work Jidoka in practice, and how does it teach you to be better at what you do? Well, there are two main techniques. The first is what can we automate to make the defects appear more visually? In writing, it's very simple. There's a wonderful thing in the word processors, which is a spell check. Whenever you make something that is grammatically dodgy or incorrectly spelled, it will show you. So you can look at it and correct it immediately. This is what we mean by automating intelligence. Intelligent automation. We take some human intelligence, put it into the machine, and the machine stops or shows when there's a problem. This is very powerful. Certainly spell checks have increased productivity of editing tremendously. But it's also very hard to do because in some things like writing, you can do it on grammar, maybe, certainly spelling, but not on context or on the actual sense of what you're saying. So the second technique is stop whenever you have doubt. Call and look into it, fix it. But do not look at problems alone. And this is very important. This is a discipline to acquire. When I'm writing something I'm not sure myself, I will send it to somebody. I will share it, and I have a number of people I trust, and they give me feedback. I think about it, and I fix it. Now, the advantage of doing this, of course, is not passing on bad work to the next step, and this is clearly more efficient. But beyond that, when you write, when you work at anything, there is a tendency you just want to work around the problem and just get it done and deliver the thing with some problems in it, but you just want to get it done. If you force yourself to actually stop and ask at the right time, you will see the context, you will see all the elements that led you to do something wrong. And this is, you will discover your own biases, and more than that, you will discover the deeper rules about making the job right. And this is where it gets really exciting, because, for instance, when you do it, it's can be frustrating and you don't realize, but I've been doing this for many years. And now when I receive a manuscript from somebody who started writing, I can immediately say, well, hey, the point is not very clear, or the argument is not very convincing, it doesn't flow very naturally, or you lose a reader, or the sentences are a bit loose and hard to follow, or the vocabulary is not that precise or specific. And it's very hard to say this to somebody who just poured his heart or her heart and soul into a first attempt, but this is exactly the kind of perspective that makes you better at what you do. You acquire this tremendously fastly through Jidoka, which is fascinating. It's this by learning to self-detect and learning to stop and discuss with others, not face problems alone. You go deeply into both your problems, your biases, but also the deep rules of what makes the job go good. You understand better how it's supposed to work. You understand better where you can contribute, and this knowledge you can clearly reinvest in the next time you do the same job or something similar. And this is what leads you to a real mastery of your own work.